Meanwhile, the man accused in that deadly stabbing rampage on the Strip in October has been found unfit to stand trial. 32-year-old Yoni Christian Barrios is accused of killing 2 people and wounding 6 others in that attack. Today, a judge ordered Barrios to remain indefinitely at a state psychiatric facility until doctors determine he's able to understand the charges against him. If he is found competent, he faces 2 counts of murder and 6 counts of attempted murder. Police say Barrios asked one of the victims, who was a showgirl, to pose for a photo moments before that attack.